And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I'm your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here, back with another AFL round review. Unless, yes, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, some technical difficulties caused me to miss last round. I'll be honest, internet provider here in town absolutely shit the bed. So I decided let's get a better internet to hopefully have that not happen again. So we are back, round 13, gonna cover it. Joining me today from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, another favorite friend of mine and friend of the podcast, USAFL media manager and footy nuffy and cricket nuffy, who I love talking with. We just spent probably the last half an hour before we even started the show talking footy and cricket. That is Mr. Brian Barish. Brian, great to see you, sir.
Donnie, we do our best work when the mics aren't hot. So
I honestly, there are times I wish I just recorded us just going back and forth because I think it'd just be just as good as the stuff that is when the mics are on, sir. So let's hop into it. Round 13 has come, it has gone. Holy shnikes, the tipsters are absolutely having a mare this particular season because as soon as I think I've got it figured out, I don't. I'll be honest, I tipped 2 of 9 this round. Holy shit, holy crap. Whoa, thoughts on this round 13 because that was mental.
it was bizarre. All these, I mean, what's the OMC song from the late '90s? So they're a New Zealand band, but they play footy in New Zealand. St. Kilda and Gold Coast in a low scoring slugfest, and that may have put a dent in Gold Coast's run to possibly sneak into the eight. Sydney being Sydney, Carlton upset, just kind of upsetting, not upsetting the apple cart, but just uh, you know, uh, knocking Essendon sideways when Essendon couldn't kick one in the ocean while standing in it. What the hell is happening with the Demons where they have 6 goals off of 21 scoring shots? Brisbane just burying the Western Bulldogs and Richmond derailing Adelaide and really, I think, probably putting a nail perhaps in a coffin for their season. They're only 10 points back, but that isn't very helpful when you lose to a team that only had one win through the season. And finally, North Melbourne has entered the chat, finally, completing the potato of AFL parody. So, yeah, it was a really crazy week, but yeah, let's get into it.
Let's jump into it right off the bat. And I know several of my friends over in South Australia are still cussing, kicking, and screaming as the Richmond Tigers, a little healthier, go over and shock the Crows with an 8 point win, 79-71. And I remember listening to a few Crows podcasts, and there was a lot of confidence going to this game. They would beat this Tigers team. This Tigers team has not been playing good footy. But when Timmy Taranto comes in, Lynch comes back in, Prestia, the meatball, comes back in, they instantly become a better team. And I think it kind of showed. I think Adelaide took this Richmond team like this was the team that was riddled with injury, a much stronger side, and they nipped the Crows by 8.
Yeah, they're a talented team. You mentioned Toronto, and he came in. He had 26 disposals. Jaden Short led everybody with 31. But yeah, I mean, these are guys who are used to playing at a high level, and this is what in the NFL we would call a trap game. I mean, this is
Mhm.
Adelaide was expected to win. These are the types of games that if you want to be playing in September, you have to win, and they didn't do that. So did they take them too lightly? I don't know. But a great job by Richmond to hang on. They had a 22-point lead at three-quarter time to hang on and win by 8. Just out kicking them 6 goals to 2 in the third quarter and going on to win in Adelaide, which is very difficult to do. So yeah, huge win for them. Just kind of it's a moral victory if nothing else, but it really, really does kind of knock Adelaide sideways and trying to get through.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I think, unfortunately, the proverbial line through Adelaide when it comes to making finals this year might have finally been put in pen instead of in pencil. But again, I'm happy for the Tigers. It's one of those. I think I hear all these broadcasters saying like, "How did Richmond beat Sydney?" Well, at the time, Richmond was much stronger at the
Yeah.
time. Bolta was healthy, Lynch was healthy, Taranto was healthy, Hopper was healthy, Prestia was healthy. I think Dylan Grimes and Dusty Martin were the only two that were out at the time for Richmond that were in their best 22. So this is a Richmond team. Talent wise, I mean, they've been like Swiss cheese this year. There's just been so many holes. They're starting to get healthy. They're going to be a danger side. They're going to be that team that it's going to be like Hawthorne, that they're going to nip somebody and they could cost somebody a finals. And this maybe could have been the ending for the Adelaide Crows. And again, I have many a Crows supporter friends that I weep with you, my friends, because this year there was a ton of expectation. So it was really hard to see that happen. So let's jump over to Marvel Stadium as the Brisbane Lions find a way to get a win. Marvel Stadium, they do well. Over at the MCG, maybe not so much, but this one's at Marvel, and the Western Bulldogs Jekyll and Hyde season continues as a 43-point loss to the Brisbane Lions, 114-71. Marcus Bontempelli, absolutely fantastic. Lockie Neal, absolutely electric. And Eric Hipwood, yes, ladies and gentlemen, Eric Hipwood goes Bunta in this game. I mean, this is the Lions I think we expected. Again, there's some people going. I mean, are Brisbane back, or was this just a temporary blip on the radar?
Well, I mean, it's we're all going to figure that out in the next couple of weeks. I mean, they have St. Kilda coming up at home. Then they go out to Port Adelaide in round 16, and then after that, then they come back to the Gabba and play a Melbourne team that, again, as we mentioned, was struggled this week. So we'll have to see. But like, I mean, again, it's the same situation as Richmond. There is a talent. There is talent here. I mean, you got Lockie Neal. I mean, Lockie Neal had a lazy 38 disposals. He's always in it. Joe Danaher is always in it. He kicked a couple of goals. These are guys that are going to get a lot of touches. They're going to contest for the ball a lot. They're going to find their targets, and they're a good side. And again, it's the same thing. The Bulldogs. You said Bontempelli he had 3 goals and he had a solid game. But the light is still flickering for the Lions. I mean, they come in now. They're 6 points out of a final spot, even on games with GWS. So they're not done by any stretch of the imagination. They also have a decent percentage boost. So, in fact, of all the 10 teams not in the finals right now, they have the best percentage, and they are currently sitting in what is that 9, 10, 11, 12, 13th place. So, um, season's not over for them, and I mean this is a great start. We'll see how they go. I think they have a couple of winnable games coming up.
Definitely, for sure. It'll be fantastic. It'll be interesting. Again, both these teams are going to keep an eye on because they're right in that area where they could still make finals, but neither have been super convincing this year. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. We'll jump out to Tasmania, which I thought it was interesting that they had fog issues there for a while, that even some of the television crew almost got there a little bit late. But the Hawks find a way to do it again as a 6-point win over the Giants. Where have the Giants fallen to? Hawks again showing why maybe, just maybe, we jumped the gun a little bit on this Hawks team, because they're one of the hottest teams in the competition right now. 4 of their last 5 wins for Mitchell's boys.
Yeah, who a lot of people forgot about them, and now all of a sudden they're technically, we'll use it in baseball terms, they're a half game out of a playoff spot. They're 4 games, they're 4 points out. They have but the GWS has a game in hand on them. But yeah, all of a sudden, like, they've come out of nowhere, and now very much they're things. They have that little mini fight back, and we saw this at the end of the season last year. Remember, they beat a string of teams. Collingwood was one of them,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden they're coming out of nowhere. Will Day with 26 posies, and Massimo D'Ambrosio. There's a name that has kind of been hidden under having come over from Essendon last year. Sicily had 22, and then the goal scoring was spread out. Gunston kicked 3. So I mean, they're looking pretty good. This was a close game throughout. In fact, GWS had a 19-point halftime lead, but 6 goals to 2 for Hawthorn. In the third quarter, they ended up, even on goals, but Hawthorn had 6 more scoring shots, which was enough. Um, it's interesting. You mentioned the fog. When I was seeing about this, I was thinking maybe we'll end up with like Bears Eagles from 1988, or the AFC Championship game between the Patriots and the Jaguars in '96. Whenever there's weird weather, it's always Tasmania. Didn't they had snow there for one game, didn't they? Or was
Mhm.
that Canberra? It was one of the two.
I know, I
But
know, and one of the snow games was Canberra, because, and it was
yeah,
these two same opponents, because the funniest part, that was the one where, if I remember right, Clarko was running around and training the day before with no shirt on. And that was an interesting one there. But so yeah, this is and we'll discuss the ending of the game a little bit later with what I think was a little bit of a trend on Saturday. I think it was Saturday,
Yeah.
just how crazy some of these endings were. But again, I love this Hawks team. There's something about them. They're getting healthy. CJ Jath is back now on the back end, and I think that they've been bolstered their defense. As you said, Will Day is back now, and he's come into the midfield and kind of stabilized it there for a while. They were kind of helter skelter. You'd have great games from Warple, and then Warple would disappear. So and Jai Newcomb is still kind of he's kind of been on and off a little bit this year, but Will Day has been really solid been since coming back. So this is uh, I I don't know. I'm not 100% ready to hop on the Hawks train when it comes to maybe they can make finals, but they're definitely convincing me because they're getting wins over teams that I mean have some pizzazz to them, including this Giants team, who I think were a fancy earlier in the year and have started to drop off a little bit. We'll see how Kingsley responds to this. Let's jump out to the West Coast. And as you said, North is finally off the schneid. I have a couple of North friends who I specifically reached out to and told them, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. As North get a 9-point win over the West Coast Eagles, 74-65. Fantastic to see North get over it. They finally get to sing the song. Thank you. Hopefully this leads to more, but as we said, kind of the string of this one, and again we'll discuss the whole entire is ends with a little bit of some interesting thought process. But again, North was really good in this game. You could see a little bit of fire into it. They went on the West Coast knowing this was a perfect opportunity. They didn't have to deal with Harley Reid. North get a win. Thank you, finally.
Yeah, and it helps when your opponent kicks 2 goals, 15 through 3/4 of
Mhm.
football. I mean, I feel for the fans who had the, you know, th- it's one of those, and I harp on West Coast, and they had all sorts of issues last year, and I feel like this is gonna last a while before they finally turn it around. But I almost feel like there was a couple of years ago where, I always, and again, I apologize. I'm going to make an NFL reference here. There was a few years ago where it was like the Cincinnati Bengals who didn't have the worst record, but you could tell they were the worst team in the league. That's how I feel with West Coast. Like they probably are top to bottom, maybe the worst team in the league. Maybe and as much as North Melbourne has struggled, the to put up to lay an egg the way they did. But as for North, I mean, listen, they played, I think, about as good a game as you can. This has definitely been, I think, their best game of the season. Nick Larkey with 5 goals, leading
Mhm.
the way, and then Zach Fisher having a really good game with 36. Harry Sheasel with 30. It's amazing to me. Like again, it helps a lot when your opponent has trouble. And they put really good pressure on him. This is the most, by the way, that he has had since he kicked 9 against Gold Coast in the last round last year for Larkey. So good for them. I'm glad that they're off the schneid. I'm glad that they finally got the monkey off their back. They did it on the road, and again, they're at this point, it's just a matter of when you're on a losing team like this, and I've had my share of being on them and following them. You take whatever positives you can and just take it into the next game. I mean, this is going to be a season where it's just going to be a learning curve, and you just have to learn. You just have to take what you can, and hopefully, when you roll it into next season, it bears a little bit more fruit.
One more year, hopefully, and with your youngsters, you still got a ton of talent. You've got Colby McKercher, you've got Zane Dersma, you've got some youngsters there that you can build off of, and we'll have to see. It'll be fascinating. Again, like I said, so happy for the North faithful because many of them, there are some diehards that I know that have weathered through the absolute shitstorm that they've been and have still stayed very loyal, and I appreciate those people very much so. So I will have to say that I respect the hell out of these North Melbourne supporters. So we'll jump to Marvel Stadium again with the third of the trio of interesting ending games as the Saint Kilda Saints survive the Gold Coast Suns by 3, 51-48. I mean, the Saints get it done, but again, I'm sitting here going, I'm not convinced by either of these teams. And Demma almost steals one on the road, which he kind of needed because right now, Gold Coast at home, very good. Gold Coast on the road, not so much.
Yeah, and unfortunate, and Gold Coast is one of those rare teams where they are the only team that plays in a home stadium. So it's not like they share it with other ones, and it's not like they play. It's not like they're going to play uh, Brisbane on the road at home. But you're right. I mean, this. I mean, how 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 things would have changed if they would have won, and then it would have been them above the line. And instead St. Kilda, a team that look, they're 2 games back. They're sitting on 20 points right now. What are their chances like? I mean, I mentioned they have Brisbane coming up next at the Gab. I think that's going to be very, very difficult. Then I think they have a bye the round after that, and then yeah, they do. And then round 17, they're home to Port Adelaide, who is, they're just again a top 4 team. But the road's not going to get too much harder. So the fact that they held on the win here, I think, is going to at least somewhat help. But the question is do they have enough? And I don't know that they do.
Mhm. Yeah, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Again, I've seen I watched a few of the shows this morning over the last couple of days. And again, Gold Coast, if you look at just their strength of schedule, they've got one of the easiest strength of schedules when it comes to easiest. So they have a chance to make the finals. But again, sometimes losing these 4-point games, losing these games sometimes can dent the confidence. I'll be interested to see how the Suns bounce back after this one. A tough loss again. We'll notch into it. The third of three interesting endings to the games. We'll jump to Sunday night. As I mean, I have to say it. Both the games that we're going to go into, there was a ton of intrigue. There was a ton of these are going to be really great games, and neither really ended out being great because we start off first. We'll go up to the SCG where Sydney continue to make the Sun jealous with how hot they are with a 40-point win over the Cats, 112-82. But again, as a Swans fan, I must admit, there were a few tight sphincters after the first quarter when Geelong kicked the first 6 goals of the game in this one, and I was going, "Uh-oh, let's not see a repeat of 2022 when it comes to the grand final." But the Swans absolutely had a hold my beer moment and absolutely went bunta after that as they kicked like 7 of the next 9 and start on a roll. And then after halftime, they just put the foot to the throat, get a win by 30, 112-82. This is not a bad Cats team. This is a Cats team. I think they're still they're licking their wounds a little bit. They still have a few guys out. They don't have Cam Guthrie. They still don't have Dangerfield. I know Danger's getting up there, but Danger on the field is always a dangerous and difficult matchup no matter where he is at. But the Swans, I mean, how do you stop Isaac Heaney, Chad Warner, Errol Goulden when both Warner and Heaney go for 26 and 2 goals, and Errol Goulden goes for 37 and a goal?
Yeah, no, it's impossible. I mean, and Heaney, I mean, we know what Heaney does. I mean, Tom Papley kicked 4 in this one, and that was especially 2 at the end, which really kind of drove the nail home. It's funny, there was like a very furious opening first 15 minutes of the game where the teams traded 7 goals.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of game it was. Is the Geelong came out and they came out. It was a track meet basically. They, like you said, they came out. The first they kicked the first 6 goals of the game. It wasn't until 14 minutes into the second quarter that the Swans finally got on the board. Then they kicked 5 in a row to finish out the second quarter, and all of a sudden we have a 5-point ball game. And yeah, that was, I mean, Sydney is, if you're going to be a good team, you have to be able to finish out games. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, it was close. They had an 11-point lead at the end of the third quarter. They went on and they kicked those 7 goals. I mean, Papley was magnificent. You mentioned Isaac Heaney, and he had a couple of cracks as well. Sydney is looking. I don't want to jinx it. I'll say this: they are in that they're deserved top of the table side, top of the ladder side, and they're playing good football right now. So yeah, it's very, very difficult to stop when, especially when you've got players of that caliber pumping on all cylinders.
Yeah, and in the crazy part is they kept. I remember that when they asked Coach Scott after the game, they're like, "Did you have a plan?" He goes, "You can always have a plan." He goes, "But sometimes the plan just doesn't work." And like the first quarter, they possessed the footy. I think Sydney overhandled it a little bit. The pressure got to them a little bit. They weren't getting to contest as much. So that was definitely one of those where it would not surprise me if Horst Longmire, after the first quarter, absolutely tongue lashed the living crap out of the Swans because they were not playing good football. Geelong was beating them to everything. The second efforts were there. So it also shows a little bit of Sydney is still not, they're not at that peak yet, which is kind of scary to say that as well as they are playing, they're still not playing their best. So I'll be fascinated to see how the Swans team goes because again, it's a long run now. They're done through their bye. They're going to play all the way up to the end of the season, no breaks. So it'll be interesting to see how the Swans team goes. And then we jump down to the MCG where we had the Titanic matchup between Essendon, who was absolutely in fuego, and a Carlton team that many people are still talking about being one of the foils to potentially Sydney. And the Blues get a 26-point win at the MCG, 96-70. I'm not going to sit here and go, this exposed the Dons, but I'm going to give more credit to the Blues are just finding ways to win. Cripper didn't have as good a game. Elijah Hollins has himself a day out, kicking 3 goals in this game. And the injury total, I think, is starting to kind of affect Essendon a little bit. They were just a littlest bit off. I don't think they're as bad as this 26-point loss, but this does dent the confidence of this Essendon Bombers team. How they respond will be fascinating.
Also, you talk about how well Carlton does. This is a blockbuster game, second versus third on the table. It's a blockbuster game to begin with.
Mhm.
In front of 88,000, 88,500 people. I mean, when's the last time Carlton has played with a game like this with that many people and this, and they were cool as a cucumber on the big stage. They really were. I think you're right. I think Essendon, with the amount of injuries that they have, and I think it's going to be a tough run home. Um, they've got who they have coming up. They're going to the bye next week, and then after that, they host West Coast. That's probably going to be a win, you would think. And then they are playing Geelong at the MCG. It's a Geelong home game at the MCG after that.
Mhm.
So they might be able to pick up a couple of wins, and then after that they play Collingwood. So I mean, it's going to be they have a favorable schedule ahead of them at the very least. Now, as for Carlton, I mean, they're solidly in second, even though they have a half game lead over them. They're off next week, and then they come back. They host Geelong. They are they're at the MCG against Richmond. Again, that's a team they should beat. They'll be at Greater Western Sydney in round 18. So I mean, Carlton, this is a team I think that very quietly and very slowly has kind of rolled into this position because this isn't your older brother's Carlton Blues side. This isn't the one that is underachieving perhaps or maybe overachieving, but not enough to be a final side. They're a deserved second place team now, do they have enough once we get into the pointy end of the season? That's still a fair bit away. But this is a big, big win for a team that is trying to prove itself that it belongs amongst the AFL's elites. And I think this might go away towards doing that.
Definitely for sure. I'm 100% with you on that one. This is a huge scalp in this particular part of the season, and you want to set yourself in the top four. I mean, all the statistics are showing if you want to win a premiership, a top four spot is almost an absolute necessary. You have the outlier. I mean, the Western Bulldogs in 2006. Excuse me, in 2016 was the one of the few outliers of that particular one. But I mean, this is exactly what they need to be is sitting near the top of the table come finals time. Again, still a long season to go, but again, the Carlton faithful are absolutely up and about. And we jump to it, the big freeze. King's birthday Monday sees Collingwood v Melbourne, and unfortunately, Melbourne forgot to show up again as a big win by the Collingwood Magpies by 38, 89-51. Petrarca goes out with, from what I'm hearing from sources, potentially two cracked ribs. So for him to kind of try to finish that quarter, I mean, absolutely Warriors type behavior. But unfortunately, Stephen May kind of got exposed in this because Will Hoskin Elliott goes as the full forward in this game and absolutely ran him ragged.
Yeah, I mean, he really just kind of picked them apart, and that was one of the reasons that they went on to win. Um, I find it very interesting. Melbourne kicked 6-15 in this game. I don't. This is one of those questions for Sir Swamp Thing on Twitter.
Hmm.
Four teams in this round had more scoring shots and lost the game. I don't know if I've ever seen a round like that. I'm sure it's been out there,
Hmm.
but this is one of these instances where Melbourne kicked, they played a perhaps they had more scoring shots and they just didn't. But you're absolutely right. I mean, they they really, I think, really struggled. Like you said, this is a game where they really had the opportunity. If they would have won, again, they're right in the thick of things. They're in a three-way tie for the eighth spot right now, but GWS has a game in hand, and right now, I mean, they're sitting behind Gold Coast on percentage. For Collingwood, they're they may end up back in the top four. A team that really has a good side but hasn't come out firing every week. They're tied for a top four spot right now. They're currently sitting in sixth, but they're right behind Geelong, they're right behind Port Adelaide, and they're only 2 points behind Essendon. So who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's gonna be absolutely fascinating. Again, this is the Collingwood. I'm gonna give some flowers to Coach McRae because I mean, I don't know how he's doing what he's doing with everything that no Degoe, no McStay, no. I mean, there is no forward line. I mean, this is literally a thrown together forward line like I have never seen before. There is no tall. I mean, Kruger comes in. This is his first game of the season. Kruger comes in, plays really, really well, but he's not a tall forward. So he's just finding a way to get it done. So this is a Collingwood team. I kind of agree. They're a little bit dangerous. Yes, they're sitting sixth on the ladder, but they're a very dangerous side because they've still got a lot of talent to still come back into this side, and they're still playing as well with third and fourth string type of players in certain some of these positions. So this Pies team are going to be fun to watch, and you know that the Magpie Army are going to be absolutely up and about come finals time if they make it, because this is going to be interesting to see this team try to defend their premiership going forward. So that is all 8 games. Port Adelaide and Fremantle had a nice little seat on the couch this particular weekend, so no other games left. So we will jump to the burning questions, and this is going to be a fun one because there's plenty of talking points that have reared their ugly heads. And we'll start off with the first one is we are now 2 games in. I wanted to talk about this last week, but due to technical difficulties, that didn't happen. So I got to ask this, your thoughts, Brian, on the change of the rule to the holding the ball, because maybe it's just me. I I'm seeing a few more holding the balls called, but I still don't 100% get what is holding the ball at times, because there are ones that I think are stone cold that aren't called, and there are ones that I'm like, man, he didn't have higher opportunity that are getting called holding the ball.
It's almost like, what is a catch in the NFL?
Pretty
That's kind
much.
of where we are. Look, I understand that, the AFL has to look out for, I mean, sometimes the easiest solution is the most straightforward one. But, we're starting to we're starting to see these things. The coaches are saying that players are at risk of injury because there were too much time to release the ball after a tackle. They've gone and changed this. I mean, the thing about changing something mid-season, we've seen this in the other sports that we follow. And usually we don't see this unless something is significantly broken.
Hmm.
And something the AFL had to think that the AFL that it was significantly broken. The problem is that this is a league that, I like to think I tell the people, they ought to somebody needs to go to AFL House, maybe the next time in Australia, and give everybody a fidget spinner because I feel like they get bored and it's like, oh, we have to change. Oh, well, we got to do something. Let's change the rule. Let's, that sort of thing. So I just I
Oh,
think
that's
in the
funny.
I think in the end, I think look, it'll hopefully it will clear things up a bit. But I mean, nobody knows what the rules are anymore, and unfortunately, we're seeing this where again something comes up and changes, and whether or not it will help, it will be seen in the coming weeks. But yeah, it's very rare unless something is like completely broken. You don't see that.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. Like there's ones that I mean I've seen it in leagues over here that they mark it down, but they're not going to change it. They'll basically say, "We'll address it in the off season, so then it's not a problem going forward," and they'll let it go, knowing that it's something that they'll think about. And sometimes you'll even see some referees, umpires, whatever they call them in whatever sport,
Mhm.
they'll change the tiniest bit, but they won't full on go to the change. But I'm one of those that I look at it. It's like I kind of liked when they weren't paying holding the ball so quickly because I think it
Yeah.
kept play going. I 100% understand. Like I think it was the Charlie Curnow Mac Andrew tackle that I think was the one that really kind of made it blatantly obvious was the fact that I agree with I think it was Damian Hardwick that said it. He goes, if Mac Andrew tackles him like we were kind of taught as as many of them were taught as kids before the concussion protocols came in. I mean, he's going to put him down on the ground. He's going to hammer his head in the ground because he's got one arm pinned and the other arm is holding the ball suspended away from him so then he can potentially make a drop for a kick. So I get it. Mac Andrews is between a rock and a hard place. If he takes him down, most likely Colonel's going to hit himself in the head. He's going to get concussed and he's going to get suspended. But if he just holds him, Colonel has the upper body strength and the strength to be able to fight through the tackle and get the kickoff, which continues the play going forward. So he's not really doing his job. So I understand with that. Like that, I 100% understand them making the change. But I think there were there's some times when I think the guys are getting tackled and I'm seeing the entire crowd go, ball. And I'm literally sitting there going, he just grabbed the ball. He had no opportunity to get rid of it. He had no prior. What are you screaming ball for? Like, and maybe it's the American brain in me. I'm like, I, I, I don't get it personally. I don't get. I understand it's a cool thing. Ball, like it's great to hear it, but there are times that I literally like I don't understand people's obsession with screaming at any time a guy gets tackled because they're. I think it was Joey Montana that said 95% of tackles that some of these coaches are complaining about. There was 110 effective tackles in the game. How many of those were actually legitimate chances for holding the ball? Maybe 10? Because a lot of times guys are getting tackled and handballing it as they're being tackled. It's an effective tackle, but the ball's still getting out. So it's not a holding the ball. So I don't know. It's a very frustrating thing. I think they're jumping at shadows a little
Mhm.
bit with some of it. I like I said, I understand the Mac Andrew Colonel version. I that needs to be stopped as soon as you see he's not going to get rid of it. We don't want the defender getting in trouble. Blow the whistle. There we go. Ball up. Okay. I'm perfectly okay with that. But I'm like, if a guy has got a guy's knees wrapped up, but he doesn't really have possession, the guy can get rid of it, then I understand calling holding the ball if he had a chance to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because I think about like when I watch soccer and I'm a season ticket holder in MLS
Hmm.
and there's, the fans are screaming for fouls whenever somebody trips over a blade of grass.
Hmm.
And some of it is a foul and some of it isn't. And so I can kind of understand the appeal for that. And I guess why people, other than the cool factor of yelling ball, that sort of thing.
Hmm. No,
But you're
I
right. I
get
mean,
it.
but what's an effective tackle? An effective tackle means you've affected the play.
Hmm.
That's it. It's not a tackle to where you don't get a statistic out of it. You don't get a, you don't get a you get a because you get a tackle if you tackle somebody with a ball. I don't know. You're right. I think they are jumping at shadows a bit, but I mean, we'll
And
see if it does anything.
I think you've umpired, I've umpired, and I've talked to several people that I know that umpire. This is not an easy sport to
No.
umpire, especially when you've got 36 blokes running around hitting each other, and you've got to make split-second decisions. And many of them, like as I said in one podcast earlier, I said the worst part that I have about the people on, and again, I'm going to preface this with a grain of salt. The people on Twitter sometimes are my favorite ones because they piss, bitch, and complain so much about why wasn't this called? I go, it's plain and simple. If I saw that field position right, he has five blokes between him and the ball. No wonder he didn't see the guy get touched on the top of the head. I mean,
Hmm.
you got to see it because the camera is the closest actual person to the position of the play. So I understand the umpires are not going to catch everything. And unless we have a robotic umpire up in a crow's nest watching everything and having some imaginary whistle to be able to stop play, they're going to miss calls. It's never going to be perfect. My thing is it's consistency. If you're consistently shit for both teams, I'm okay with it. If you're
Yeah.
consistently strict with both teams, I'm okay with it. It's when it appears to be like a team is getting the rub of the green, that's when I have a problem. And that's more of my thing. Like that's the most frustrating part as a fan is when you can clearly see something that is exactly the same as what just happened and it's called two different ways. Again, we're dealing with human beings. It's going to happen, but it is the one thing that is so frustrating as a fan sometimes is when you see a obvious thing called one way and then 10 seconds later it happens on the other side and it's called completely different. So
Yeah.
let's get off that one. We could be on that for days and days and
For a
days and
while,
still
yeah.
probably never go on to it. So and this is and the next question. I know there's going to be a few people going, "Why, Coach? What are you doing? Homer question?" No, I'm asking it only because for one of the few times we have a two game spread between first and second. There is an 8 point gap. I know it's still earlier in the year, but I mean, are Sydney the best team in the comp, or are we running into the fact that Sydney's playing really, really well, and a lot of the teams that are chasing them are just stumbling at the worst possible time?
I think it's a little of column A and a little from column B. We just talked about how good of a team, how well some of their players are firing. And you mentioned Heaney, and we mentioned Papley, and we mentioned a couple of these other guys. They're playing solidly. And we mentioned, I don't know that we've mentioned their schedule yet. They've got Adelaide next, game they probably should win, even though it's on the road. They have GWS. That's going to be a tough game, but I think they're better than GWS, assuming that, you know, assuming that they don't that the Swans play the way they're supposed to. Then
Fremantle.
they've got Fremantle at home. That's probably a victory. They come back to Marvel for St. Kilda. That's probably a win. Then they host North Melbourne. That should be a win. Then they go to Brisbane at the Gabba. That'll be a difficult game. A win, I think, would be a bonus from that. Then they go and they've got the Bulldogs at home. After that, they've got Port on the road, and then home to Collingwood. That could be a tough one. The same thing with Port. Um, and then let's see. Then they're at Essendon at the Docklands. That's probably a victory, depending on where Essendon is at that point in time. And then they finish off with another game against Adelaide. And again, that if everybody's healthy. So you're looking, I don't know, they'll probably end up with 18 or 19 wins, which should get them the minor premiership, assuming that nobody behind them makes. And they also have a game. They also, they have a what is that, a 6 point lead, an 8 point lead over
Hmm.
Carlton and 10 over Essendon, and they have a game in
Game in
hand.
hand. Hmm.
So, I mean, if they could easily finish with 19 wins. They could easily, 19 or 20 wins. They'll finish, and easily do it. They have to stay healthy.
Hmm.
And some of these teams are putting together good seasons with string and twine and glue, and they're still rolling along. So I think that it is a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Carlton is playing well, but how long are they going to be able to sustain that? Essendon is suffering injuries. Port Adelaide is rolling along, but they too, I think they're a good side. They're in that borderline top four. Geelong is having an inconsistent season. Collingwood is overachieving probably at this point with the amount of injuries that they have having.
Mm-hmm.
Fremantle, I don't think is up at that level yet, and then you have the rest. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a little bit. So I think they're playing great football right now, and the fact that the other teams are kind of like you said, there's not a consistent red hot team that is right behind them to chase them.
Yeah, and the weirdest part about it is it just if you go by percentage, like a percentage ladder, number two would be Fremantle, and they're sitting seventh right now. So that's
Hmm.
it just shows you how tight this season has been. I'm looking at it right now. I'm not afraid to say it. I think two of the top four sides that I think will be top four at the end of the year are not in the top four right now. I honestly believe that. I
Yeah.
think two of the top four sides that I think will be in the top four at the end of the year are not even in the top four right now. I think that's
Yeah.
how crazy this season could be. That I think two 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 teams in the top four right now, I think will stay. But I think two more are coming from outside the four right now. That's how crazy I think this season could end up being.
Yeah, one more little thing to that craziness part. You mentioned Sydney. Has the best percentage. Fremantle, who is in seventh, has the second. The third best percentage, the
Western
Brisbane
Bull,
Lions. No,
Brisbane
the
Lions.
Brisbane
Yep.
Lions, who are sitting in 13th, then the Bulldogs, who are sitting in 11th.
Yep.
But then you have the other side. You have Essendon, who are, I think they're the 11th percentage, mind you. They're over 100%. I realize this now.
Hmm.
13 of the 18 teams have a percentage of 100 or higher.
Hmm.
13 teams have a positive uh, point spread. That is it is this season is bizarre. It's
Hmm.
if we have another week. Listen, if we have a fourth draw, I'm going to call shenanigans.
It won't. The way this season is going, nothing will surprise me. I will. I definitely think there's a possibility for at least one, if not two or three, more draws. The way this season is going, for sure. So,
Yep.
we'll jump to the next question. Let's have our fun again. We talked a little bit of umpiring with the first question, and we're gonna talk some more here, which many of the people that listen to the podcast know I hate talking about umpires because I believe it's something that is part of the game, but I don't think as big as what many fans would like it to be. And that is three games end with some controversy. We'll go with that. Hawthorn gets the win after a controversial down the field kick on James Sicily leads to a Gunston goal, which leads to the 6 point lead and the win for the Hawthorn Hawks. You have the controversy of the hold by Mac Andrew on I think it was Max King that led to Max King's goal, which gave St. Kilda the 3 point lead and the win, and the North Melbourne the holding the ball on Elliot Yo after being tackled by Jai Simpkin, which led to Jai Simpkin slotting the goal and giving North Melbourne the win over West Coast. I asked this as a fan of Aussie rules and an AFL fan as a whole, is it frustrating to see games ending with these question marks?
You mentioned I've umpired, I've refereed, I've all these other sports before. You do have to have a I go back and forth in this because we've also said, it's a shame to see a game end like X,
Hmm.
or it's a shame to see, or you don't call that, or at the end of a game. Like that is
Hmm.
not a call that you make because it changes. You were so dialed in on making the correct call. You don't know how much time is left, especially in the AFL. You don't know how much time is left because they don't
Hmm.
put the clock on the board. But but it does suck. Look, the Eagles, lost the Super Bowl. I mean, it wasn't the only reason, but they lost a chance at coming back off a holding penalty, which, as it turns out, was probably a hold. And, it's a question, well, you don't make that call with a minute and a half left in the Super Bowl. It doesn't matter if it's a minute and a half left in the Super Bowl, or in this case, it doesn't matter if it's in the grand final or if it's at your job is to dial in and to make a judgment call based on your knowledge of the rules, your interpretation of the rules.
Hmm.
You are dialed into that. It's one of those things like in soccer, like sometimes they don't give these people cards because it's like, oh well, they don't
Only
want
the
to, you don't
first
want to
minute. It's
cheat.
only the first minute of the game.
It's only the first minute. We can't do that. Did he break a rule?
Does my
Is
head
it in
in.
the rule book? So
Absolutely does my head in when that stuff happens. Like legitimately does my head in when they do that. And I'll jump into this. It's more frustrating because all it does is lead fan bases, especially for teams like lost that fall short in it, to make it off like that was the only thing that lost them the game. I've said numerous times, there is a whole concoction of things that probably are the reason that cost the games. Why were you that close? Like the argument, like, oh, well, let me take it West Coast. You're playing North. Like I'm again, no disrespect to North, but North have been atrocious this year. Why are you that close to North late in the fourth quarter?
you,
I know you don't have Harley Reid, but Elliot Yo has played really, really well. Tim Kelly's played really well. You had Waterman back. I think you have a better team on paper. You shouldn't be that close to North for North to have that opportunity. So as much as I understand that everybody's going to point the finger at that play, it's not always that simple. It's not always that obvious. And I'll
Mhm.
sit here and say this. I bet if I go back and watch that game again and with a fine tooth comb, I can probably find you at least 8 to 10 missed calls both ways. So as much as I understand the gripe, all it does is it really does my head in because it microscopically says this is the reason this game ended the way it is, and most of the time it is not even close to that.
Yeah, there was a uh, I remember reading about the 1985 World Series, and again, I'm switching sports. I'm sorry, Australians. This is how I operate. The 1985 World Series, and St. Louis is 1 out from beating the Royals in Game 6.
Mhm.
And there was a very famous missed out call at first base.
Mhm.
Larry Dirkinger calls Dane Urg safe
Safe.
when he was out by a half a step.
Mhm.
The Royals go on and win, and then blow out St. Louis 11 to nothing in Game 7. And when they are down 10 nothing, Whitey Herzog, who's the manager of St. Louis, comes out and is yelling at Denkinger, "You're the reason we're going to lose this series." And Denkinger says, "No, the fact that you've only hit 175 in the World Series is why you're losing the World Series, going to lose the World Series." So it's easy to place the umpires under a microscope when they make a call at what seems like a very inopportune time. But a game is not simply a moment, especially at the end of the game.
Mhm.
You've got 75 plus minutes of other things that can lead up to that point. And if after 75 minutes you, you are losing to North Melbourne, the umpires didn't put you in that position. You did.
Mhm.
Unless the umpires blow every single call up to that point, in which case there's a problem. But that it's not it's yeah, I mean, look, if there are times when umpiring and refereeing is so bad that it's like, but it's just so it's you're right, it's so tiresome.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing as a sports fan. Like I said, I understand the plight of a sports fan. Okay. I think every sports fan knows your plight where something doesn't go your way. But basing it all down to one thing that happened. Yes, I know in an important time of the game. I understand that, but it does my head in way too much. So speaking of sport, I want to have some fun because as I specifically and intentionally mentioned, as a person here living in the States, and so is Brian, um, sir, we had the great luxury of knowing that our cricket team, which again, for many people, yes, USA have a cricket team, somehow knocked off world power Pakistan in the T20 World Cup. So I thought I had to do a connection with this and ask you as somebody that goes to the USAFL and me as a coach here, for you, sir, Is there something you think the AFL could do to give us that type of moment that would help expand AFL expand footy? Sorry for the people that run the AFL is not a sport Twitter account. My apologies. Footy over here in the States to maybe go off that, like just like how cricket potentially could grow off this win over Pakistan.
Oh, this is such a complicated question because the AFL had a great chance in 2020. And there was an opportunity when all we were watching was the AFL to grow. And I'm in the trenches. You know this because you've made many friends during that same period, and we both made connections, and more people got on the US AFL. But there's a golden opportunity then. The thing with this victory over Pakistan, I would equate it because there were some people that were saying, "Oh, it's like Miracle on Ice all over again," and it's nowhere near that
Mm-mm.
because of there was Cold War implications and there was a bunch of college kids. These are professionals. They're not top level professionals, but they're professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it's about on the level of Colombia, the U.S. being Colombia in the '94 World Cup. It's a sport that has a following, maybe not as mainstream, although the NASL did exist in the '70s and helped kickstart kind of where we are now with youth programs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's kind of where it is. Now, cricket has this inherent issue, I think, of I feel that cricket has an issue with making the sport accessible. And there's some talk about, there's certain diasporas that are kind of hanging on to the game and don't want it to become, they don't want, and I use the term that they use, and I don't mean anything outside of that,
Mm-hmm.
white Americans, and I'm using air quotes for those of you who can't see me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is this saying that, oh, white Americans, quote unquote, will never get into cricket. So there is a lot of parochialism and I think of some gatekeeping behind that, although
Mm-hmm.
everybody I've encountered in the sport has not been like that at all. Especially, and I was talking to Donnie about this. We're recording this the day after India and Pakistan. I They hosted a party and I mean, it was mostly Indians there at this watch party, about 500 people, and I was maybe, I would say, one of about a dozen or so not of Indian origin watching this match. But now, what can the you now? So this was a national moment. Now we have the Transatlantic Cup coming up,
Mm-hmm.
but the AFL has not put the money that the ICC has put millions and millions of dollars in this. The
Mm-hmm.
AFL has not put millions and millions of dollars in it. And frankly, for a tournament like this, I don't think they could or should put millions of dollars in it. So I think from that perspective, I don't know that we could that if the US Revolution in this Transatlantic Cup, if they run the table and beat Ireland and and go all the way and win the Transatlantic Cup, we'll know about it. Anybody who knows about the AFL might know about it, depending on how much they promote
Mm-hmm.
it. But I think that's the thing is that you're dealing with an organization. Even the ICC has so much more money and so much more resources. So it's I struggle with it. I don't think they will see this sort of moment. But I do think what they can do, and they're doing this right now, and I'm involved in some part of it, is just thinking as much like investment. If they think that the U.S. is a fertile market, then the idea is they're going to have to sink their money into it. I don't know that there will be the seminal moment. I felt like the Mason Cox moment was a pretty good one,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know how much the needle has moved on that. So that's kind of how I feel about it. The way the international cricket is set up so much differently than international Aussie rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% with you on that one. I honestly, there's a couple of ways that I could see them maybe making a dent to where it could maybe get it going. And that's and I've seen many an Australian that are against it, and that is playing for 4 points over here in the States, having an AFL regular season home and away match on American soil. I know that at one time GWS and Essen was thrown out. I think there's a couple other machinations on that. And now that you have cricket pitches over here to where potentially you could have something at least good enough that, or at least the scale wise that most of the AFLs would do, I think it would do something. But the only issue I would see was is that it would have to be done to where it could be played prime time over here, which I think would be difficult to set it up over in the state over in
Mm.
Australia. And I think that would be the issue that you run into. Like if this was like again, utopian moment here. So please stay with me, Australians that are listening to this. If this was played in LA at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, local LA time, to where you could play it prime time in the East Coast where our beloved Brian Barish is, I think you have a chance. You have a chance to maybe get a needle starting to move if it were GWS and Collingwood, because you've got Mason Cox, the American, playing in that game. You've got GWS, who, like I said, the newest team there. You have that connection with potentially with that. The fact that there were some American business owners that were thinking about purchasing GWS until they found out how the kind of ownership thing that was, that for me is maybe a start. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's the way it's going to go. But I think it's something they could pull off and they could do. And I think it maybe could give a little bit of a punch. Again, I'm not sure. I don't think ESPN's going to go for it. It maybe would be have to be with Fox. And Fox is not exactly been hugely throwing their money behind this, shall we say. I know Craig Wessels and I have gone back and forth about how there's no advertising about any of the games that are on Fox or Fox Sports 1 or Fox Sports 2 or Fox Soccer Plus. So I just, that for me would be it. A game for 4 points, prime time over here in the
Yep.
States. And I want it to happen. I would somehow want to find a way to pilgrimage wherever it is, or if it's in LA, if it's in Dallas, Texas, if it's in New York, I don't care. I would try to go just because I would want to be part of that moment. I just, unfortunately, I just don't know if the powers at AFL House are going to be willing to do it. So,
Yeah. And I will say that the difference between the AFL and the ICC, if the AFL does it, it will be strictly for the growth of the game. There will be some money considerations, but they will do it to grow the game. The ICC is not hosting the World Cup here to grow the sport for two reasons. One, they the cheapest tickets for most of the games start at like $75.
mhm,
So that is not, and there have been a few games, and I've had friends that have gone to the games in New York. There've been a few games where that have been played in front of half empty. They built that 34,000 seat temporary stadium in the
mhm,
middle of Long Island. They can't sell half the tickets. They're selling two and three and $4,000 premium packages, and nobody's buying them because nobody's going to spend $3,000 on that, especially in a temporary stadium. Side note, Peter Della Penna, who is the dean of American cricket reporting, was taking pictures of, and him and a few other people were taking pictures of how empty everything was, to the point where they have not allowed reporters to go into that into the premium area anymore because they're tired of being told that nobody's buying those tickets. They're playing in New York because they wanted and they got a large audience, and they're selling it for the diasporas. It's the same reason, say what you want about the AFL. The AFL is on American television. It's on Fox. It's on Fox
mhm,
Sports. It's on Fox Sports 1. If nobody saw the game the other day against Pakistan because the game was on Willow.
mhm,
And it's the same thing with the Watch AFL. I've been shouting and saying, we need to make sure that the AFL is on American TV. When those 2 seasons where we went 6 weeks without a contract, And I'm sitting here screaming, it has to be on TV. And people are saying, well, all you have to do is get watch AFL. Well, you don't know what watch AFL is unless you see the game to start. If you don't
Hmm.
know what the AFL is and you don't know what footy is, you're not going to know what watch AFL is.
Hmm.
So it's great if you know the game. And that's and that's the problem. These games, the USA Cricket and the ICC were like, they're giving us the most money to host this. We're going to have it. And if you want to go and watch, you have to pay $15 a month for a Willow subscription. Or if you know the game enough to listen to it, there are other outlets, which, by the way, I'm going to plug Gorilla Cricket because screw a lot of the regular outlets. Them and White Line Wireless is another one. Same thing, but based out of Australia. They're much more fun to listen to than say the BBC and others. But that's my commercial, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on it. It's funny listening to an old English guy drop F bombs. That's all I'm gonna say.
I love it.
Uh, but yeah, but that's kind of where it is. It's two different situations, but I think the AFL and the other thing is that, I mean, the AFL is going to be up in Toronto. The heads of a lot of these leagues are going to be in Toronto as well. I'm sure there's going to be some discussions in terms of what to do,
Hmm.
and hopefully something will change.
I mean, and I have another idea, but I've mentioned it a couple of times, and that was the fact that if you ungimmicked AFLX, I think you could have found a way
Absolutely.
to maybe even professionalized it over here and played it in Dallas, in Minnesota, in New York. There are huge 70,000 seat stadiums that if you could just reduce the field size to almost a squarish rugby pitch, maybe round the corners a little bit so you still get some of the rounded ovals, but you went down to nine aside or 10 aside and you played almost an AFL X style. I think you could have gotten something going over here, but it was gimmicked out of its mind, and that's the reason why everybody absolutely poo-pooed all over it. So let's not go into that particular rant. So that'll do it for the burning questions again. I always love talking with you on that because you're just as passionate about it. I absolutely love it. So we'll jump to the part of the podcast I take over just the tiniest bit. For those of you watching the podcast on YouTube, I was making sure that I had this written down. I had my notes up here, but I forgot to put them down in my note section of my phone. So team of the week this week. We'll start off as per usual with the defenders. We'll start off on the fullback line. Hawthorns, James Sicily, West Coast, Alex Witherden, and Melbourne's Trent Rivers on the fullback line. In the halfback line, we see Harry Sheasel of the North Melbourne Roos, Gold Coast Sam Flanders, and Essendon's Nick Martin. And we'll jump to the midfield. We start in the ruck. We have Max Gawn of the Melbourne Demons. On the wings, we see Errol Goulden of the Sydney Swans and Richmond's Camden McIntosh. In the centers, we see Brisbane's Lockie Neal, North Melbourne's Jai Simpkin, and Western Bulldogs Marcus Bontempelli. We jump to the half forward line. We see Brisbane's Eric Hipwood, GWS's Xavier O'Halloran, and Carlton's Elijah Hollins. And the full forward line, we see West Coast Jake Plugger Waterman, Norse Nick Larkey, and Sydney's Tom Papley. On the bench, the defender is St. Kilda's Jackson Clare. The ruck is Sydney's Brody Grundy. The midfielder is Sydney's Isaac Heaney, and the forward is Essendon's Matt Guelphy. So I know a lot of names really quickly. Thoughts on team of the week?
Sounds good.
You're like, oh, good. uh,
And then I found $5. I was listening, but yeah, listen, I trust your judgment on a lot of these. I'm like, okay.
the thing that I found fascinating was I got down, is like I had to choose between Heaney or Warner for that midfield spot. And
So,
their statistics were so close. So I gave it to Heaney, but again, I hat tip to Warner. I think he was fantastic. Power rankings for the last couple of weeks. This will be fun because again, I'm a what have you done for me lately? Last five rounds. We'll go to it. Number five, the Brisbane Lions. Number four, the Fremantle Dockers. I know they didn't play, but they didn't lose. So you can't go down
mhm.
if you don't lose. Number three, the Hawthorn Hawks. Number two, the Carlton Blues. And staying at number one, the Sydney Swans. So that is the power rankings there. I'm going to do just the tiniest bit of a change here. Originally, we were going to do tipping, but you want to know what? I want to have some fun. because of the hat that my co-host is wearing, I thought let's talk about this. We are less than 2 days away. We are less than a week away from Central and Eastern Super Regionals in Dublin, Ohio, over here in the States. And since we have the media manager, I thought let's talk a little USA footy really quickly. Your thoughts? Central Regionals, Brian, one of your favorite times of the year, teams meeting in Dublin, Ohio to have some fun playing footy.
This is what I lovingly refer to as the USAFL traveling roadshow, where we go selling, trying to preach the gospel of Aussie rules to different parts of the country. So, for those who aren't familiar with the USAFL, um, one, you and everybody else, but it is a 40, what are we up to? Almost 50 team league, and teams play during the course of the season. However, twice during the year, and they're both happening in the same time of the month, or the same month. We have regional tournaments. Now, in the past, we've had three. We've had one in the East, one in the Central, one in the West. As of last year, we have combined the East and the Central regionals. Last year, we were in Olathe, Kansas, which is just outside of Kansas City. And this year, as Donnie mentioned, we'll be in Dublin, Ohio, which is just to the west of Columbus, which is right smack dab in the middle of the state that's next to mine. Which, if you're into college football, apparently we're not supposed to like Ohio, but whatever. Um, but we have 20, technically 24 different clubs because we actually have a couple coming from the West Coast that are coming in, but 24 clubs and 17, actually, no, 15 teams across three men's division and a women's division. It's in, as we said, Darry Fields in Dublin, Ohio, and it's 9 hours of footy. Every game, a game every hour on the hour. The men's games are two 20-minute halves. Each of the men's teams in each of the three divisions will play three games rather over the course of the day. We have a three-team women's division. They'll play a round robin. Those games will be 60 minutes long, four 15-minute quarters. This is going to be interesting for a couple of reasons, and I'll run down some of the teams very quickly. The men's divisions, it's the five-time defending national champions, Austin Crows, the Baltimore Dockers, the Denver Bulldogs, and the Minnesota Freeze. Denver is not bringing an entire side. They're going to be topped up with players from three other clubs, including Philadelphia, Seattle, and Boston. We mentioned Austin has won the last five national championships and eight of the last 10. They lost super regionals last year to Denver on a kick after the siren. I don't know if that's going to happen this year because, as I mentioned, Denver is only bringing 14 players and they're being topped up. They're going to have 18 total, which means they'll probably be playing 16 or 17 aside. Baltimore is the number two seed. They're perennially a D2 side. It'd be interesting to see how they play. Division two, it's Columbus, the Columbus Cats, a combination of the DC Eagles and North Carolina Tigers, Houston and Wisconsin in a combination, and then Donnie's Des Moines Roosters in North Texas. I think this is a wide open group. I like Columbus at home, but DC is a very good side with a lot of Australians, so we'll see how that goes. And then Division three, these are teams that are still developing, and in some cases have mostly Americans and maybe a handful of Australians. The Nashville Kangaroos, the Chicago Swans, the Oklahoma Buffaloes, and the St. Louis Blues. Not those St. Louis Blues, the other ones. Um, be interesting to see how that pans out because those are, again, teams that are just developing. And then for the women, the two-time defending runners-up at nationals, the Minnesota Freeze, they will have, actually, here, I I was looking at something here, but we have the Minnesota Freeze, the Austin Crows, who will be paired with Denver, and the DC Eagles. Those will be the main clubs. Um, the one underlying thing about all of this is that we, of course, have the Transatlantic Cup coming up in about a month's time. The teams for those are set to be named at the end of the month. There are going to be players in these games that are going to either play their way in or perhaps play their way out of those 28 athlete rosters. So that is something to watch out for because there's a lot of people involved. I mean, the teams are going after a trophy, but for some of these American athletes, there is a little bit more on the line. So again, Saturday, June 15th, The we are hoping to stream the matches via our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/USAFL 1997. If not, all the games on Field 2 and Field 3 will be taped at the very least, so you can come back and watch that another time. It's these tournaments are fun. This is the largest tournament outside of nationals, and I'm going to be calling as of now at least 6 games. I'm at 293 games called, so I'm either going to end the weekend on 299 or 300. We'll see how it plays out, but
All right.
yeah, should be a fantastic week. And Donnie will be there. We were just talking about the possibility that he may be getting to call a game or so, so we'll have to figure that out. But yeah, no, it's very exciting, and I'm excited to have tournament footy again.
I'm really hoping I can get on for at least one game of special comments. I'm not sure if I'm ready for the big leagues of calling play by play or ball by ball, shall we say, the footy. But I love hopping on and doing some special comments, especially with the coaching background, is always fun. But I will definitely be there. I know for those of you that listen to the podcast, I know Craig Wessels, the Yank on the Footy, plans on coming, so I know he's probably going to have a few podcasts connected with that. So I'm really really excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's a 9 hour trip for me, so not a short one, but I'm super excited. Cannot wait for this weekend. It'll be a lot of fun. Our group is challenging, but I think I've got a fun group that I think is going to go out. We're going to give it a crack no matter what happens. It will be good experience for some of the youngsters. So we will end the podcast with tipping as per usual. Let's jump right into it. A few teams are off with the bye this week, with the 6 teams having a rest this round. Let's get to the correct round, Coach Hess. That is definitely a positive way to start off the tipping, with Gold Coast, Carleton, Geelong, Essendon, Melbourne, and West Coast all having a rest this round. We jump to it. Friday night footy, an interesting one, as the Brisbane Lions host the St. Kilda Saints up at the Gabba. Who do you like in this one?
Lions at home at the Gabba. I mean, I this is going to be tough. I mean, I mean, they're both right at the same time, and I think one team is their seat. I think this is a pivotal point. The team that wins, I think, is still very much in it, and you can probably get out the pen for the other team. I'm going to say Brisbane at home. St. Kilda really hasn't showed me a whole lot, but I like the Lions, and I think they're on an upward trend.
I'm with you on this one. I'm gonna tip Brisbane in this one. St. Kilda's pesky, but I just think if the Brisbane team that showed up this last weekend shows up in this one, I think it could be a long night for Ross Lions men on that one. So I have Brisbane on this one. We see Saturday afternoon footy sees the Western Bulldogs take on the Fremantle Dockers at Marvel Stadium. The Dockers flying over to the east. Can they snatch a win? I'm going to tip the doggies in this one. Unfortunately, Frio, they still are not 100% convincing. This is an offensive style doggies team. And sometimes with this Dockers team, when they play an offensive juggernaut, they play so much defense, they don't get their scoring going. I'm gonna tip the doggies in this one. I just think a little too much talent and skill in the mids for the Fremantle Dockers, though their midfield is quite good.
I agree. If they're playing this game at Optus, I think you have to tip. You have to
Yep.
say the Dockers are
Same.
favorites. You're right. I think they're still not consistent enough to really trust them. I would tip the doggies at home.
100% on this one. I think a scary good game coming up next at the MCG. Dusty's 300th game sees the Tigers take on a Hawks team that are absolutely in fuego in this one. Who do you like?
I like the Hawks. I think this is going to be a very emotional game, considering the injury issues that Rusty's had. But like you said, Hawthorne is unconscious right now, and it amazes me how on earth are they 1 game out of the playoffs and or out of the finals rather, and they're sitting with uh you know I think only 3 teams have a worse percentage than they do. How on earth is that the case? But I think they'll win here. I think Richmond will be on a high, but if you had to like pick a margin here, I would say less than 2 goals.
I'm 100% with you. I think Richmond's going to give this a red hot crack, being Dusty's 300th, but I think the way the Hawks are playing, if they play the way they have been, I think the Hawks too good. I think their midfield is going to have a ball in this one. Tipping the Hawks. Tiger is a sneaky chance in this one, but going to tip the Hawks in this one. As a Swans fan, this next one scares the living crud out of me. Sydney at the Adelaide Crow at Adelaide Oval against the Crows. Yes, the Crows have not been playing well, but this is a danger game for the Swans because this is the same place, same venue that all the controversy from last year happened. Who do you like
Yeah,
in this one?
yeah. Don't mention Zivor. Uh, um, I like Sydney. I think Adelaide kind of la-di-da'd through the last game. I mean, hopefully they'll be whipped into shape for this one, but really hard to tip the best team in the competition, tip against the best team in the competition. Even on the road, I think Sydney wins this one.
Gonna tip Sydney, but this one scares the living tar out of me. I'm just being honest. This one scares me because I think you get a motivated Adelaide team that literally they are the fans of the club are trying to torch every official, not the fan, not the players, not the coaches, everybody in the front office and above. I think literally right now their seat is on fire. That's how angry many are at Adelaide right now. So it could be quite the interesting little hornet's nest that the Swans could be walking into. It'll be interesting to see how the players respond to the controversy of the fans' reaction, shall we say, to their loss to the Richmond Tigers on that one. An interesting one at Marvel Stadium as North hosts Collingwood. I'm going to tip the Pies in this one. But I have a sneaky feeling, do not count the Roos as a team that's just going to roll over in this one. They've got some confidence, they've got some momentum. Jai Simpkins playing better. And you never know. Sometimes a win could lead to some fun. I'm going to tip Collingwood North, I think, sneaky in this
I'm not in any tipping competition, so I can do this with kind of reckless abandon. I'm tipping North. I th- I
one.
I give behold my field of Fs because there is no it is barren. Um, no, I think you know they're a team with a little bit of a team with a little bit of momentum against a team that's, as we've said on a couple of occasions, are are running on farts and fumes at the moment. And I think I think it'll be close, but I think one of two things will happen. I think either North wins by 10 points or 12 points, or Collingwood becomes the first AFL/VFL team to draw 3 games in a season.
Wouldn't
And it's going to feel like
wouldn't
a
shock me.
loss if they do.
It wouldn't shock me a bit, to be honest with you. I know the funny part is I'm looking at the AFL website right now. The betting they are a $7 underdog to a 110 favorite for Collingwood. So it's that's going to be a fun. If you're right, Ben, somebody's some if somebody throws down a nice little thing, it could be a nice little rich turnover on that one. And last but not least, Sunday afternoon footy sees GWS host Port Adelaide in Sydney. I'm interested in this one because I'm not really confident in either team. I think Port Adelaide are still they're still fighting through some things. They're coming off the bye. Do we see Rosie come back or not? And GWS, unfortunately, with the injuries that they have in their midfield, they have looked rather vulnerable. Who do you like in this one?
Ooh, this is a toss up. It's not quite a throw up, but it's a toss up. You kind of have to give the edge to the home side here. I think GWS may have a little bit of an edge. I think Port Adelaide, they'll be rested or they could be rusty. So I think GWS is good here. I think Port Adelaide is one of these teams that's in that they've played themselves into a position to be a top four, but I think that they're going to stumble here, especially on the road. So I would say GWS, but again, I think it's going to be a close game.
I think on the road, coming off the bye, I think actually can some be a bad thing. Like I think that's the reason Sydney struggled a little bit. You could definitely tell they were a little bit rusty off a week playing a team that had been playing multiple weeks before. I'm also going to tip GWS in this one. Again, I just Hogan, Riccardi, and Toby Green, I think, may give Port Adelaide a lot of headaches because they aren't your prototypical big forwards. And with Radigalia and Alir and Zerk Thatcher, they really don't have a lot of speed in that defensive line. And with the speed that sometimes GWS can come with through the middle, I think it's going to give them headaches. I'm going to tip the Giants in this one again. I'm not counting out Port. If Rosie comes in, it could change some things in the mid, which could be interesting. And then I would also say the matchup Karen Briggs and Yvonne Saldo or Jordan Sweet, how does that go? Because if Breaks gets up, it may give GWS that little bit of help, though they are not 100% in the midfield on that one. So, like the Giants, Port, sneaky, definitely keep an eye on. So, that is it, sir. That is all of the games. That is all 6 games that we get to tip. Unfortunately, the small rounds over the next 2 rounds with only 6 games apiece. So, kind of sad, but unfortunately, that's the way the bye weeks go. So, that is going to do it for our show. One second, I forgot. I forgot. We wanted to talk about this. We'll let him throw it in. We talked about regionals, but there's another thing, Brian, that you have coming up really, really soon. And you've kind of talked about it, the Transatlantic Cup up in Toronto. For those that don't know what it is, tell us just a little bit about it and when will that happen and who will be participating?
I thought you were going to say that I was going to go see Thomas the Tank Engine in a couple of weeks because I'm really excited about that. No, um,
Well, I mean, you
no,
could.
yeah, I could, but I will not. No, so the Transatlantic Cup. So for those of you who might be familiar, of course, there was the AFL International Cup, which was the closest thing that Aussie rules had to a World Cup, which was supposed to happen in 2020. Enough said. Then it was
In
going to happen in
2021, then it didn't
2021,
happen. And then
which became
22.
2023. And then, of course, they said 2024. And then last year, they were like, on second thought, why go to Melbourne when you can go to Toronto? So the Transatlantic Cup is what it is. It's one of 3 regional tournaments being hosted by the AFL. The other one, there's an Asian Cup and a Pacific Cup, which are going to be held in November. Um, I think they're both going to be held in Australia. I know for a fact that the Pacific Cup's going to be held in at Maroochydore, which is where the AFL International Cup was supposed to be in 2020, but that's another story. But anyway, August 2nd through the 11th will be when the Transatlantic Cup is. 6 countries with a men's team and a women's team. The U.S., Canada, France, Ireland, Great Britain, and for the first time, Colombia. And Colombia is a very interesting story. The team there is being organized by, of course, there's an AFL Colombia, which the U.S. has sent a couple of teams. We've had Austin and Denver go down in the past to play them, and there was a combined women's team that played against uh, the Bogota Bulldogs a few years ago. But Josh Kennedy, the former Sydney Swan, is helping to organize that. His wife is Colombian, and he's trying to organize the participation in it. And I will tell you right now, if you are interested in maybe helping a little bit of history happen, they do have a GoFundMe out. They're trying to raise, I think, 15,000 Australian dollars to get their women's team over there, and they're about halfway to where they need to be. So you can go looking for it. It's the AFL Colombia GoFundMe. But you can also help us out because we we need help getting to Canada as well. So if you want to donate to an American footy player, it is through you can check on our website and check through the USAFL social media. But it's 10 days of footy. There's going to be 3 games per day. 3 games of pool play, and then a semifinal and a grand final, which will be on Sunday, the 11th. The games, as we said, are happening in Toronto at Colonel Sam Smith Park, the only dedicated footy oval in North America. Which of course is where they play the games for AFL Ontario. The last time the U.S. was there was when the men were there in 2022, and they won. But they are not playing Canada in this, which is a stroke of genius by the AFL. Why, have all these teams come and then end up playing your neighbor, because Great Britain is not playing Ireland either. So that's exciting. And it should be fun. I think from an American perspective, I think the men, you would look at who they're going up against. I think the men have a chance at least of making it to the grand final. I would say Ireland, depending on the team they bring, is probably your favorite. Then the U.S. and then probably either Great Britain or Canada. And then for the women, I think Ireland, no matter who they bring, and we just saw the team that came out, I think Ireland has to be the odds-on favorite. I think Canada probably is sitting second. Who's coming out for the U.S. U.S. and Great Britain, I think, are just about the same. It's just like it was in 2017 at the International Cup. Ireland and Canada, I think a lot of people are tipping them to be the grand final. The U.S. and Great Britain, Great Britain is going to be much improved than they were a few years ago. But these are a lot of players that are cycling in that perhaps haven't had a chance at the national team program before, or they only had it a couple of years ago. They haven't been through a cup cycle. So it'll be interesting to see. All the games will be streamed online. I will be one of four commentators. They have two from Canada, and of course, our you mentioned Peter Holden a little bit earlier. He's going to be there from Toronto. So it should be a fun week. If you get the chance, tune in. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I cannot wait myself. I would have loved to get up to Toronto to help with some calling, but unfortunately, it's a little bit tight when it comes to it, getting a new job in PTO time. But I will definitely be tuning in for sure. So that is going to do it a full episode here, both a little bit from Australia and a little bit over here in the States. So, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. Keep an eye out. We are getting closer. Waffle Sample and VFL. We are getting closer to women's finals and more into the thick of things when it comes to the men's competition as well. Keep an eye out for more coverage very, very soon. That'll do it for me here on Donnie's Disposals. We'll be back with more footy very, very soon.